all downhill from here.
Mark is living in Durham, but he has lived all over the world. He's worked for several international nonprofits, starting with the Peace Corps in Ecuador. His wife, Jean, grew up here. This is amazing. Her family has been in Durham since 1766. And as Mark and Jean have moved around, Jean has taught English as a second language in the many places they've lived. Mark is hoping to offer another session later in the year on a subject that he's interested in now, a timely subject of conflict culture and conflict across culture. So stay tuned for announcements about that. But tonight the focus is on India. Late last year, Mark and a friend traveled for a month there, following in the steps of Buddha. And he's generously come here to share his experience with us. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you all for coming out with the change of date. I wasn't sure how many people would make it, but I'm very grateful that you've come out tonight. As Naomi said, I'm going to be speaking about a month traveling in India, which was during those months, so it wasn't that long ago. And this is the area that my friend Ricardo and I traveled in. So the talk tonight will be many images and a few stories about traveling and the reality that we face there, and quite a bit about the way we organized this, which was around the life of the historical Buddha. So just a note of introduction about my traveling companion.
Do you want the mic?
Yes, please. We'll do that now. So this is Ricardo Gómez and myself as we got together for this trip at JFK. I've known Ricardo, you can see here pretty much how long I've known Ricardo. It's been quite a while. He's Colombian. We worked together in Ecuador, and in the years between the mid-90s and now, he and I have kept in touch. We've worked together in Asia after that, and about halfway through this friendship, he and I both began to practice a kind of meditation, a simple kind of non-religious meditation, which is based on Buddhist principles. So about 2 years ago, we said, how could we spend more time together? And we figured we would maybe try to travel a little rough in India for a while. And as an excuse, what we would do, we would follow the footsteps of the Buddha, not as a religious pilgrimage, but as a way of spending a month together, traveling around this part of India. So, a disclaimer before I get into that. I'm not an expert on India, not a historian or an economist or development economist. So, and I'm also not a very enlightened being. I'm not a Buddhist in a sort of academic sense. So I can't share with you any expertise about India or about Buddhism historically, but I can tell you about this trip, and that's what I want to do tonight. I want to tell you about this trip that we took. But first, a little bit about India. How many of you have traveled in India? Great. So you have a sense of it, the only thing I'd like to bring us up to date on is that for those who haven't traveled there, India is a vast, ancient country with an amazing several thousand years of spiritual history. It's a vast land. Today it's something like 1.2 billion people, about 80% Hindu and 15% Muslim. And with the complications and sometimes conflicts that come with that. But what I would say is, having lived in Asia and now traveled on this trip, if an alien asked me, where should we come to get to know what life on Earth is like today in 2018? Sadly, I wouldn't say come to beautiful Durham. I would say, if you want to know what human life is like, the human experience is like today in 2018, go to India, go to China, go to Asia. So that really motivated us, Ricardo and I, to go back to India. So that's a brief bit about India. This trip will describe a voyage to these places. This is a map which is of this inset, this part of India. This map is more historical, though, and it shows the places of the life of that person, the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama. So we'll be going tonight to these different places, and I'll show you lots of images of those places and some stories. But just as a thumbnail about that person, that historical person. He was born in Lumbini in around 623 BC, so he's sort of a contemporary of Socrates and Confucius. We're not sure exactly about the dates, but something like that. Lumbini today is actually in Nepal, so we'll cross the border on this trip. He grew up in this town, which is the capital of this kingdom of the day. So he grew up here as a prince, the son of the king of that era. At 29, he left on a spiritual quest. We'll talk more about that. And at age 35, 6 years later, he finds himself here in Bodh Gaya, where he figures things out for himself. Then he goes across here in the days following his enlightenment, his so-called enlightenment. He goes here and he has his first opportunity to explain what he's found in his meditations here. He has his first sort of community center here, or monastery type situation here. He has a group of people here, starts to build a community. In the intervening years, he then spends 24 rainy seasons here, back up here in Shravasti. In the rainy season, he and his community would stop because traveling was very difficult during those times of the year. And he dies here 45 years after this event here at the ripe old age of 80 years old. So we're going to now take a trip through those places, and I'll show you what they look like today. So on the 18th of September, Ricardo flew up from Colombia, where he lives. I took the CNJ down to New York. I got over to the JFK. We flew and had a long layover in Doha on Qatar Airways, and then proceeded on to Kolkata, which is the capital of the state of West Bengal, which is here. So we actually arrived early in the morning on the 20th of September. So Kolkata is an enormous town, 15 million people. It's a vibrant, chaotic, modern, developing a city full of culture. It's very well known for poetry and literature. Tagore, who many of you have heard of, I think a Nobel Prize winner, is from here. And it has a bit of an image problem for us in the West, because we think of Kolkata as an extremely poor place. And of course there is a lot of poverty in Kolkata. But that's not all there is to it. And so I was looking forward to get to know this city with such an image problem, I think, in the West, but such a proud, current situation. We came from the airport and got a B&B here, an Airbnb in this part of town. This is a map, obviously, of Kolkata. There's a very modern metro or subway that goes the length of this part of the town, the center of the town. Very convenient and completely terrifying most of the day in terms of crowding, I have to tell you. But it facilitated Ricardo and I's ability to get around to these places. And so the places that you'd love to go to, that we went to, and I won't spend much time on Kolkata because it doesn't have a Buddhist history to it. There's a great Hindu temple here. This is where Mother Teresa's work was. I'll come back to that in a minute. There's a great coffee house with lousy coffee, if that works for you here, and the river. So I'll show you some images of Kolkata now. If you can make this out, what I'm telling you here is it was hot and it was humid. It was the end of the rainy season. It rained just the first morning for us, but it was really quite impactful to be there. So a few scenes. This is the center of Kolkata, a very vibrant place. Food on the streets. This is a sidewalk in town. Another sidewalk in town, and here's Ricardo walking up ahead of me. We weren't eating there, actually. We were just trying to get through. So some images of what the older part of town looks like. Of course, there's a modern part of town. We just didn't, as tourists, we didn't spend a lot of time there. Here's that famous coffee house. It's in all the itineraries. You want to go there if you go. And what you go there for is not the coffee, which is pretty watery, but here I am in this beautiful old sort of colonial time. This is a picture of Tagore, a famous poet and writer of Kolkata. And it's been like this since colonial times, so it's sort of a must visit. If any of you have seen the recent movie Lion, which a lot of that movie takes place in Kolkata, is the river, the Hooghly River and the Howrah Bridge figure in the neighborhoods where that movie takes place. And you can get around a lot in Kolkata on the ferries. There are commuter ferries, which are quite convenient, and Ricardo and I did that. India is a nation of festivals. It seems like there's always a festival coming. We were there just before a very big festival called Durga Puja. And we were lucky enough to see these figures, these mannequins, being produced in an area called Kumartuli, where the workshops are. This is obviously a workshop specialized in Ganesh. If you want a Ganesh, you're going to go to this particular one. Here they're taking some of the mannequins out to be delivered to the neighborhood where it was going to be shown. I think I mentioned it was warm. Here are some, I just thought that was picturesque, some of the mannequins obviously discarded at the end of the festival. That's me taking that picture. And this is the center of Kolkata, so I think it's a quite picturesque place. Now, I mentioned Mother Teresa, and I had read and thought ahead of time that, from what I had read, that there was a lot of resentment of her work amongst the people in Kolkata because of the image problem. People think of Kolkata because they know her, Westerners know her, and they think of the kind of poverty that she was associated with. And that I had heard that people resented that a lot. Well, I didn't feel that. In fact, here's a street corner, a random street corner, with religious figures or spiritual figures, and she's right in the center of that. And this is nowhere near her house, so I thought that was rather interesting. My friend Ricardo is a very devout Catholic, and he wanted to spend time in this place, and I found it to be actually quite interesting, even though I'm not. Quite interesting to visit it also. We were there the first time of the 3 times we visited. There was a mass going on. This block of marble here is actually her tomb. So it's right in that area next to a very small and quite elegant museum of her life. It's quite a moving place to visit. From Kolkata, we flew to Varanasi. Varanasi is here, which is sort of our jumping off spot point for the Buddha part of our trip, following the footsteps of the Buddha. So we flew this way by airplane, obviously, and I want to show you a few images of Varanasi. It's not a place associated with Buddhism, but it's an ancient city, full of alleyways and religious seekers and cows and everything you want to see and a lot you don't. It's a very auspicious site. It's on the Ganges, and it's a very auspicious site for cremation, which is something that you can, if you're so inclined, you can go and see that happening. I don't have any images of that here because it's just to be respectful of the families who are there. But it's a very touching process and very impactful process, especially for a Westerner. This was the owner of our B&B. Some images of the town. This is the Ganges and some people doing puja or some animals doing puja. This is on the banks of the Ganges. It's the old part of Varanasi. Not a great picture because we were looking into the sun, but it is a picture of the banks and what they call the burning ghats, which are the cremation areas, are all along here. Just some other images of the city of Varanasi. Little alleyways with little shrines and people attending to those shrines, and just an amazing place to walk around. You see these people all over, at least the parts of India I know. They're called sadhus. They're religious seekers, spiritual seekers. And Siddhartha, who became who was the historical Buddha, was one of these, as we'll come to in a moment. But they're still there in India. It's a very noble tradition, I think, of people who really enter into a life of spiritual seeking. And there's another one. Please.
It's a really interesting thing. I found it almost impossible to believe when I heard it for the first time, but then I heard it from people who were physicists, mathematicians from India, and the bacteria from the manuscript who know the philosophy.
I still wouldn't want to drink it.
Yeah, you would not drink it, but sometimes after a certain period of time, bacteria just disappear. Bacteria think they're in there for a while, they disappear, nobody understands it.
Some other images of people we saw in Varanasi. It was very, very hot, and neither Ricardo nor I drink a lot of soft drinks, but when you could get a cold drink, we really tried to go for it. So I thought this was a good image of pleasure. From Varanasi, we made our first stop, which represented something in the life of the Buddha. Sarnath is a day trip from Varanasi, and so we went, I think, 3 times. We spent 3 days in Sarnath base out of Varanasi. And I want to show you a little bit about Varanasi. This is a place where the Buddha gave his first sort of sermon, you call it in Western terms, or his discourse about what he had found when he became enlightened, when he had gone through that period of meditation. And this is an image. I'll be showing you a number of these images of events in his life, which are from the walls of a temple in Lumbini, a Cambodian temple in Lumbini in Nepal, which portray these, and I took pictures of them, and I think they're very nice ways of portraying what was happening. So here in Sarnath, he reunites with 5 of his friends who had abandoned him because he had started to actually eat after 6 years in self-denial. And I'll come back to that event later. He reunites with them and shares with them what he's discovered, what he's worked out about, what he thinks the best way to live is. In each of these places, Ricardo and I sat, and we were not rushing from place to place. We had a whole month to do this trip. So we had plenty of time to talk to each other and reflect and meditate while we were in these places. And when we were in Sarnath, which is the place of his first public speech about his philosophy, we reflected on one of his findings, what he calls the 4 Noble Truths, which are one of his big insights, that life, often you'll see this translated as is suffering, but it's an old Pali word, and you could call it unsatisfactory, because we all die. Everything which is created comes apart. His second understanding was there's a better way to approach that issue. The better way is not being so attached to things, not being so averse to things we don't want. And he outlined in his speech here a path to do that, to lessen attachment and craving. So that's what he's talking about here. And Ricardo and I spent a lot of time reflecting on that ourselves. And we spent a lot of time talking about shorthand for us, for him mostly, for Ricardo, meaning fast track. So the difference between an approach to spirituality or religion, which is focused on meditation and reflection over years, or one which is focused on devotion, adoration, and so forth, worship. Not that they're mutually exclusive, but we talked about the interplay between a long track up the mountain and a fast track of devotion. So those are the things that he and I spent a lot of time thinking about and meditating about when we were in Sarnath. I picture Siddhartha, the person who had become a Buddha, an enlightened one, looking like this as he arrived in Sarnath, because he had spent 6 years of self-denial, which was traditional in those days. The secret to a spiritual life was self-denial. And one of his insights was that's nonsense. That's just as much nonsense as a life of luxury. But I picture him looking as this present-day sadhu, or this mural which was on the wall there in Lumbini. And in this place, in Sarnath, of course, there are a lot of, you see here some religious pilgrims, Sri Lankan here, an American guy, sweating as always, and a lot of translations of of the present day version of what he spoke when he went there, and a representation of that. So you see these representations around. What he spoke about was a middle way, having come from a royal family, used to a life of luxury. He rejected that. And he rejected these 6 years of self-denial as being false also. So he said, neither of those are the right and proper way to live. I've mentioned the Four Noble Truths. He talked about cause and effect in a very scientific way, referred to in our language as karma or kama, the law of cause and effect. He emphasized the non-fast track, that understanding of the best way to live is through a long process of meditation and reflection. And of the day, which was a Hindu country as it is now, those were revolutionary messages, which were very threatening to the establishment of the time. But that's what he talked about when he came here. And this is what the place looks like now. So it's a big area. It was a deer park at the time, established for sadhus, religious seekers like him, a place where the local king provided space for people like him to be. And you see the archaeological evidence of the monasteries and temples that have been there in the years since 600 and something BC. There isn't a huge amount of historical evidence. This is pre-writing time when he lived. But what we have is, and we'll see two of these, we'll see another in a few minutes. And you can't really see it here, but this is the remains of what they call an Ashokan pillar, built by King Ashoka about 300 or 400 years after Siddhartha dies. And these pillars, which were enormous, were put at the significant places of the life of the person. So not that long after he dies, and they had engravings on them. So these are one of the main ways that we know what actually happens in these places, is these Ashokan pillars. It's a beautiful place with a very well-tended lawn, lots of people from Varanasi, Indians from Varanasi, having picnics there, and a few people like us meditating. This is not Ricardo meditating, this is afterwards. But this is my little stool that I use, the little rag that I got because it was so hot. So this is after a meditation session. So I'm going to play now one of two little sounds I've got. This is a temple near the place you just saw. They're reciting the sutra, the discourse that the Buddha gave, supposedly, in this place. They're reciting this.
Can you say that again?
Say that again.
So they were reciting, and Ricardo and I sat with them over in 2 evenings like that, and that recording I made on my phone. They're reciting the sutra, the discourse that the Buddha gave in that place, or the records we have of that, which were written down a couple of months after he died. So, or memorized, a couple of months after he died. So they're reciting that, and that's an evidence of what Ricardo and I were talking about as a fast track. So if you recite it, you'll gain merit in life, which is something that I think is different from what the idea of dedication to meditation and hard work. From Varanasi, we launched north towards these other places. We took a train up to what became sort of the center of our world for a little while, Gorakhpur, which is not as significant in any way about our trip, except we ended up going through there 3 or 4 times. So we took a train from Varanasi up to Gorakhpur, and then we took a bus up to the border. So the Nepali border is here. And then it was night, and there was no place to stay, so we had to take a taxi about a half an hour to the town of Lumbini. Lumbini is where the Buddha was born. Siddhartha Gautama was born. This is the train we took. This is a pretty nice train. You see there are fans here. I think it's air conditioned. There were seat assignments that worked. Some of them didn't on this trip, but these seat assignments worked, so we had a seat. There's power points here, electrical plugs. So this is pretty luxurious. We got on a bus here. You see me there. That's actually a pretty nice bus, actually, also. So from Gorakhpur, we took this bus up to the border in a town called Sonauli. So we arrive here in the Indian border town of Sonauli pretty late, so that it's dark by the time we actually made our way to the physical border. I like that picture of this guy who was at the bus stop. Ricardo actually took this picture. So here we leave the Indian border. It's nighttime. Cross over into Nepal. 24-hour crossing, possibly. You get your border, your visa right there, and we make our way to Lumbini in Nepal. We're now in Nepal. Part of Nepal called the Terai, which is the lowland. So, on a good day, you can see the Himalayas, but you're far from them. We never actually saw them on this trip. So this is a mural in that Cambodian temple that I mentioned, portraying a religious view of the birth of Buddha. You see the little guy here, he's just born, he's actually just a small adult. And he's walking along on these lotus flowers, and his mother is holding on to this branch. There's something quite significant about that I don't quite understand. This is obviously a religious view of the guy, and some sort of godlike view, which portrays what is celebrated as happening there. So what did happen there? He was born premature. His mother, with a group, because she was the queen of this area, are on their way home to Kapilavastu. She gives birth premature 16 miles away in this place. She dies a few weeks later, and he's then raised by his aunt, the younger sister of his mother. And as I mentioned, I think that he never claimed to be anything other than a teacher, but through the years, like many religious figures, I think he's become a sort of a subject of worship, and he's shown here certainly as a mystical figure. This is the entrance to the area where the actual birth is supposed to have taken place. And Ricardo and I spent time reflecting there in this place about that fourth truth that he speaks of, the path to enlightenment, or to actually a good life. And the fourth truth is, here's 8 things, the ways you need to live. And some of them are memorialized here on the way into this big peace park, which is established around the site of his birth. This is what Lumbini, Nepal looks like. It's a fairly dusty, small town in that part of Nepal. Here's a map of the area. This peace park is enormous. And I don't know, it's hard to understand why it is so big. It's about 3 miles by 1 mile. And this town here where we stayed is here. And the temple which memorializes or marks the place where he was born is there. And it's about 3 miles up to, with all of these monasteries and temples scattered throughout with a master plan for 20 or 50 years from now that they want it to be big, but there's not a lot of money. This is the temple which has been built over the place where supposedly Siddhartha was born. And his mother then had a little bath afterwards here. So inside this place, you're not allowed to bring cameras or phones, so you can't take pictures. But there are some online, so this is sort of what it looks like inside. You see Tibetan monks here visiting a place, so you can walk around the place where there's a stone, which is a very, very old marker of this particular place. And there's a very famous sort of statue on the side of it, which depicts this birth of a little adult, actually. And there's an Ashokan pillar. I mentioned that when we were in Sarnath. There's an Ashokan pillar there, right next to this place, which is very nicely protected, the place where he was born. And this has some writing down here you can actually still see. So this is sort of the historical evidence that we've got that something actually did happen here. This is a view of the length of that peace park. They've built this. There's these boats that run tourists or pilgrims back and forth. You can see here at the very end a beautiful white Japanese stupa, peace pagoda they call it. And we walked to the end of that. You'll see that in a minute. This whole area, internal combustion, is banned. So there are electric rickshaws and electric motorcycles that you can rent. And we did that the last day we were there. So there's that pagoda at the very end. Some images of people that we took while we were there. Some creative use of English. From Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, we went to Kapilavastu, which is actually where he grew up, as supposedly either as a very high caste, rich son of a rich man, or son of the king of the area, of the Sakya kingdom. You'll see him referred to in some ways that were referred to him as Sakya Muni, which is a reference to the kingdom that he was supposedly a prince of. So it's not easy to get from Lumbini to Kapilavastu. So to get there, to visit the place where he grew up until he was age 29, we rented a motorcycle. And Ricardo got on the back of that and off we went. And they actually make it fairly easy. Nepal is a Hindu country, but there are a number of people like us who go there, so there were maps about how to get to different places in the life of the historical Buddha, and places, sort of milestones along the way which could guide you, and people were very friendly. So we made our way over. It's about 16, 17 miles, 29, 27 kilometers, and it was warm. As you can see, it's quite warm. And there is, in the place where the capital of that kingdom was, there are archaeological remnants, digs that have taken place over the years that you can visit. So there actually was a capital there. Whether or not he lived there is, we think so. And the historical record is not entirely clear, but it looks as if that's the case.
How far back does that go?
How far back
How
in
far
time?
back? What years? Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about 600 BC. And at the end of this talk, we'll return to this place because of something that was found there. And that's been dated. So we do know that human settlements here, at least that old. We had run in, you may recognize him from a couple of slides ago in Lumbini, and he actually is a guide who lives in Kapilavastu and helps show us around. These are two places, two mounds which represent or commemorate or actually could be the places where the Buddha's father and mother, the king and queen of that kingdom, were buried. So from Kapilavastu, we make our way back to Lumbini and then back down to Gorakhpur. So we cross the border back again. We come back up here. We spent the night in Gorakhpur. We go to Shravasti, which was our next stop. In Gorakhpur, just a couple of pictures. This is a highway overpass, and these are rickshaws. I thought that was sort of pretty to see. A little bit of litter, but I think it's a pretty picture. This is still Gorakhpur. I think this is the first picture of food. Food was fantastic. It was just fantastic. This is a restaurant we went back to after this every time we went through Gorakhpur. Just a fantastic place to eat. This is the train ticket selling area. Now I thought that table was rather interesting. So this is the place we went to buy our ticket to go onward to Shravasti. You fill out your little form here and put it at the window to get your pay and get your ticket. So I was thinking I'd be there long enough to see it collapse, but it didn't. Here we're making our way to Shravasti, which I'll show you in a moment. This is the first train station we got to out of Gorakhpur. If I had more time, I'd tell you about this man, but just briefly, he's a rickshaw driver who helped us in Balrampur. We got completely lost. A Muslim man, a businessman who spoke English, helped us find a rickshaw to get to the right place. And it was this guy. Zero English. a lot of hills. He's on a pedal rickshaw, and we had our bags. And then 5 days later, when we come back through here after Srivasti, it's a big town. Bahawalpur is not a small place. We find the same rickshaw driver to take us the other way. It was a joyful reunion. In Bahawalpur, on the way back, we had to spend quite a few hours waiting for a train onward. And I got friendly with the station master, who said, "We get 2 foreigners here a year." So that was his quota. That night was his quota. On our way to Srivasti. So now the transport is getting a little more challenging and quite fun to figure it out and make it work. And now we've arrived at Srivasti. Srivasti is, if you remember my little thumbnail sketch of his life, this is the place where during the rainy seasons for 24 years, he brought his community, which was now thousands of people, to stay and to not travel during the rainy seasons. So again, this is a very large, beautifully maintained area. We're back in India, by the way, with excavations and markings of the things that happened here. And so there's a fair degree of certainty about what actually happened in this place. Run the wrong direction. This is the house, or this marks the spot where the historical Buddha actually lived during this time. This was his place. And so you see a lot of monks here, and you'll see a picture of those in a moment. But this is the place that he actually lived during the 24 rainy seasons. This is a Bodhi tree. We'll come back to the most famous Bodhi tree, which is at Bodhgaya. This is a Bodhi tree, and you see the pilgrims have decorated it, a representation of the teaching that he's famous for. So a very beautiful place, very easy to meditate on the lawn there, very peaceful surroundings, a lot of monks in the area meditating also. And you may think, if you know Buddhism at all, you know that one of the characteristics is they talk about how our minds are like monkeys that jump from place to place. Well, there's plenty of monkeys to make you think about it. I mentioned earlier that this is a country of festivals, and that it is a country of 80% Hindu and 15% Muslim. And those festivals of those communities sometimes cause some friction. This is a Hindu festival in Srivasti. We stayed, I think, 5 days in Srivasti, visiting those places. And after we left, a few days later, we saw on a website that there had been a couple people killed in religious conflict in this place over these festivals. We didn't see any conflict ourselves. In Srivasti was the worst hotel that we stayed at. And the reason is we didn't stay at the worst hotels generally. We probably had enough money to not really stay at the very cheapest places. And we wanted some air conditioning. Why lie about it? We were a little bit pampered. But at this place, the air conditioning, which was there, was going like that all night. So it was not a really great place to stay. The food was okay, and the people were great. So we ended up staying there. There really was no other place to stay. This is a fairly remote place. From Srivasti, we went to Kushinagar. Kushinagar is here, so we went back through Gorakhpur by that little tuk-tuk to a bus, to a train to Gorakhpur, and we went to Kushinagar in a bus, in a public bus. Kushinagar is the place where the historical Buddha died. So this is from that temple in Lumbini I mentioned, the Cambodian temple. This is an image of his death in Kushinagar. So I think we spent 4 or 5 days in Kushinagar. It's easy to reflect in a place like that about impermanence and death, because that's what is memorialized, or that's what is remembered in that place, because it's the place where this historical figure died. And in fact, that's what Ricardo and I spent a lot of time talking about. And I myself had particularly, I would say, significant reflections there, as you'll see in a minute. But this is what we talked about. And it was a very productive thing to be talking about, and provoked to were brought to us by the fact of what happened in this place. So he dies at age 80. It's fairly well documented. He had been so-called Buddha, or it had been 45 years since he had had his enlightenment. I'd always read that he died of bad pork. And it just struck me as a little bit, as a Buddhist, pork, there seems to be, in our day, that's a little bit of a contradiction in terms. What I learned there is that the dish that he ate has the word pig in it. But it's a mushroom dish. It's like truffles that pigs find. And so my understanding now is that he got dysentery from eating bad mushrooms, a dish of bad mushrooms. On our way in the bus to Kushinagar, and one thing I noticed this afternoon about this is this guy taking a picture of Ricardo taking a picture of me. This is what the site looks like in Kushinagar. So again, very well maintained, big lawns, which are beautifully maintained. This is a building with a beautiful statue, which you'll see in a moment. And this stupa represents the place, the actual place where he died. This is that statue. So it's a statue representing the Buddha dead, in death. And there are famous images here because in some of what you read, some of his followers were very extremely sad that he died, and others said, look, everything's impermanent, right? So don't you get it?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What's the size of that monument?
It's a big monument. So you see, this is a nun here.
No, I mean of the
Oh.
Buddha.
That statue is about from here to the door for me, about that big. Maybe a little bigger than that. There are many temples in this area. This is, unfortunately, I don't have a picture of the stupa. It's a Burmese stupa, which is here. I thought it was very nice that these monk statues were there along the side, and here's another monk, so pseudo monks standing amongst them. We did a lot of meditation on these lawns, Ricardo and I, thinking about impermanence. And one of the things that helps you understand impermanence is that this is actually the only place where we have a lot of mosquitoes. And I was bitten a lot there. So say what you will about the Indian Health Service, but you can easily get prophylaxis for anti-malarials. So that was something that came in handy. Once we were both bitten a lot by mosquitoes, in this one place we were able to get doxycycline and make sure we didn't get a malarial attack. In the same area, there are other things that are memorialized. This is a mound 3 or 4 miles away from Kushinagar, which represents the place where he was cremated. There's a river near here, so after dying, they brought him here by this river to be cremated. I personally had a very strong sense, and this is me here with this line through me, and you can see here there are monks meditating, there are people doing selfies here. It's not exactly a temple, but there's a very strong feeling in this place of impermanence, and a good lesson for me that I was absorbing here. These are the last words, purported to be the last words of Buddha, which are, I think, quite meaningful for me personally. Everything is going to end, so get to it, get working, figure stuff out yourself. I think that's a very good lesson. The last stop we made in this following along the path of the Buddha was probably the most important pilgrimage site of all of them, which is here in the town of Bodh Gaya, near a large town called Gaya. So from Kushinagar, we backtracked to Gorakhpur in the bus. We took a train to Patna, which had been, a long time ago, had been a capital of India, in the conjunction of rivers here. And then another train to Gaya, and then a rickshaw late at night, or next morning to Bodh Gaya. And I should have mentioned that Jean and I had actually visited these two places in 2002, so this was the second time that I had been to Bodh Gaya, but many years later. Here's the train platform, getting ready to go from Gorakhpur down to over to Patna. You get an idea of what it looks like. In Patna, you have to go from one train station all the way across town to another train station. So, for some reason, maybe sins of a previous life, I was always the one who had to negotiate things in this traveling partnership. And I thought that's also a good view because here you see sort of the amount of stuff I was carrying, including that meditation stool and so forth. So here I'm negotiating our rickshaw over across from one side of Patna to the other to get the train onwards to Gaya. Good food in Patna. It's a really good place. I wish we could have spent more time in Patna. Here's the Patna train station, getting ready to go further on our trip to down south to Gaya. This was crowded. This was a more of a challenge for us. Now you'll see that was a third. Here we're in a third-class train car with assigned seats. It means nothing. It means nothing. So we had actually these seats here, and that really didn't mean a whole lot as we pulled out of Gaya, which is okay, I think. It was a good experience. So here, Ricardo or I are taking a selfie back through the window of the train car into where we're sitting. That's what that train car looked like. So this is Bodh Gaya. This is the most important site for religious pilgrims, for Buddhist religious pilgrims. This is a temple which has been put just on the side of the place which is memorialized as where he sat and actually decided to meditate until he figured stuff out. When Gene and I were there in 2002, you could bring we didn't have mobile phones, so we brought cameras in. There have been tensions in this area and some actual attack fairly recently in this area. So you can no longer bring your cell phone into the area of the temple, which is a pity because we didn't bring cameras because you've got a camera on your phone. So I don't have a lot of pictures inside here, but it's a really interesting area inside with lots of places memorialized in the religious tradition of what happened to the Buddha there. And lots of Tibetan refugees from India, living in India now, worshiping. This place is really overrun with Tibetans. So what happened in Bodh Gaya is he decided to sit until he figured it out. If you remember, he had been traveling for 6 years as a sadhu in a lot of self-denial. And when he reached this place, he said, that's not the right way. My life as a prince with all that luxury, that was distracting me. This life of self-denial is stupid. I'm just killing myself here. So I'm going to go this middle way. And here you see, memorialized by that, is a young woman named Sujata is in the myth here, offers him rice milk, and then he begins to eat again and decides, look, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to sit here until I figure it out under this tree, outside of this river. So that's what is memorialized there. And it's a very busy place. Lots of people go to Bodh Gaya because of what happened there. This is the tree. So you saw that temple a minute ago, and this tree is a descendant of the actual tree from 600 BC. It's there. And one thing I meant to do was to hand out. Along the way, I didn't pick these from these trees, but I actually picked them up off the ground. So you can pass these around. These are actual leaves from these places that I'm talking about. So this is the tree this is celebrated as the place that he sat underneath this tree and meditated until he figured it out. Our reflections, we had 5 days in Bodh Gaya. We're around the noble truths that he talks about, the fact that he was dedicated, the fact that he did not teach a religious perspective. He taught personal experience with no faith, no deity. This in a country of millions of gods. A way of life focused on meditation. And he really said, look, if this doesn't work for you, try something else. I think it'll work for you. but try something else if it doesn't work. So Ricardo and I spend a lot of time meditating on these things in this place. Now, Bodh Gaya is very busy. There's a lot going on there. It's a very noisy place. Unfortunately, in the area right around the temple, there are many pilgrim groups, and now, as opposed to 2000, they've got loudspeakers, so they're giving their lessons in loudspeakers, which is great for them. I think it's a very meaningful thing for them to be doing. But if you just want to meditate, it's not very conducive. We found this Thai monastery with this meditation area, which was they were open and very generous with us, that we could come in there by ourselves. There were fans, which was very helpful. And we were able to just sit and meditate in this place for a couple of hours a day during the whole time we were there, which was really great, very productive and very generous of them. So just a couple of images around the town of Bodh Gaya. This is a Tibetan monastery. This is where we ate most of the time. Again, really great food in Bodh Gaya. We found a place and usually just went there all the time just because it was healthy for us. So we went to this place just about all the time. We had a great chai there also. One thing I haven't mentioned anything negative so far, but many of you have traveled in India and you know what I mean when I say that hygiene should be their highest priority now. Really, it's a vibrant democracy. We're developing fast. Really, hygiene is something that you get a handle on. It would be very helpful. This is right next to the place where the Buddha sat and was enlightened, and it's really a pretty dirty place. Our very last stop we did from Bodh Gaya. This is a place, if you remember, I mentioned he had his first sort of little community group, a sort of a retreat, a monastery here, Rajgir. A very hard place to get by public transportation, so we really sort of spoiled ourselves and hired a car and a driver and went in a day to Rajgir and to Nalanda, which I won't talk about today. So we were able to get to both of those places, and I'll show you what Rajgir looks like. One of the leaves that's passing around is a bamboo leaf from this place. This was his first monastery called Venuvan, which is very famous for being a place of a bamboo grove. Very beautiful place. So this is the location of his first sort of monastic site during the time. It was a big town at the time. There's a mountain nearby. We're now in the state of Bihar, and this area is very mountainous. And there is actually quite terrifying chair that takes you up. It really is. I immediately regretted getting on that, but here I am still surviving. So up at the top, there's a beautiful Japanese stupa like that white one I showed you in Lumbini. Don't have pictures of that here tonight. But what there is this place, so we're up near the top of the mountain. Rajgir, where that bamboo grove is over this way. And this is a place where apparently Siddhartha came while he was living in this area to meditate. A pretty posh place, I think, to come and meditate because it's cooler and quite private. So this is a place that we saw some Thai pilgrims who came in here and sat here and meditated for a time. One of the things which is notable about this place, called Buzzard's Peak, is that there was an assassination attempt against him here. I mentioned earlier that his teachings were pretty much revolutionary in terms of the spiritual tradition of the day. A lot of people who were well invested in providing services, birth, death, ceremonial services through the tradition of the day. And he really said that's fine if you need it, but it's really not necessary. You can figure this out yourself. So this was, as his movement grew, that was pretty threatening. So in the history that you read, there was an attempt to kill him here. There are rocks up above here, which you can still see. And the person who tried to kill him pushed a rock down, and he was actually injured. He was meditating in this place. A reflection of, I think, the threat that he represented. And for the next several hundred years, 400, 500, 600 years, Buddhism is very common in it sort of sweeps this part of India. but Hinduism resurges. It goes back thousands of years and is a very potent force, a very potent force of meaning for people there. And today there are basically no Buddhists in India anymore. Here we're walking down from Peak. This sort of represents the end of the journey. Here I'm going through this symbolic exit. This was the last place. Rajgir was the last place of the Buddhist part of our trip. We had to get back to Kolkata to take the plane home. So we took a train from Gaya. It's about a 7 or 8 hour, if you're lucky, a good train, which we took. Ended up being about 9 hours back to Kolkata from Gaya. I show this just because it's sort of this is a middle level hotel, this kind of place we stayed at. And this is in Gaya, waiting for the train the next morning. Train station in Gaya, the train we took. Now you'll get an idea now of this trip was challenging and adventurous, but it wasn't a life full of sacrifice. Because this train we took a second class train with a sleeper. It was fun. It was great. In Kolkata, we found this is a chain restaurant called Haldiram, sort of a middle-class place. You get a good thali there for cheap. And Ricardo just refused after that to go anywhere else. We just kept going back to Haldiram. We ate there every night, every afternoon. So I want to end the talk by telling you that after this whole month of sort of seeing these locations and having these reflections, we actually found the Buddha in Kolkata. Never expected to have that happen, but we had a couple of days extra in Kolkata, and we actually came face to face with the person. Before we did that, we went to the Botanic Garden. We had an extra day in Kolkata. In the rivers and ponds around southern seacoast New Hampshire, you'll see lily pads. Well, those aren't lily pads. These are lily pads in the Botanic Garden. And there's a tree in the Botanic Garden in Kolkata, which is, if not the largest tree in the world, it's got to be up there. This is one tree with roots that have come down. The actual original trunk has been dead a long time, but it's still alive. And it's almost 5 acres, circumference of 1,600 feet. This is one tree. That afternoon, because we had time to spend, we were waiting for our plane was the next day, we went to the Indian Museum in Kolkata. Now this was just because we had extra time. I had read that there were some relics of the Buddha there. And after the talk, if you want to look at some of the books I used, you can. But in this book, which is from the meditation tradition that Ricardo and I both follow, it said, if you've got time, go to the Indian Museum. There are some relics of the Buddha. I didn't know what that meant. A beautiful museum with lots of statues that came from the places we had visited, like this one was from Sarnath. Very interesting place. But I asked at the information desk, so what are these relics? What's a relic mean? And if you remember when we were up in Kapilavatthu, I said that, and in Kushinagar, when he died, he was cremated. And his remains were distributed to the 8 kingdoms of the time, including the one where he was from. And about 100 years ago, they did some excavation in that place. And they found, which is this place, near this place. And they found this. So in a room, which was only for pottery, just boring pottery from some time in the history of the country, there is this. And these are 2 pieces of the end of a finger. And Ricardo and I were it's hard to process it after a month of following this thing around, to actually say, what are you talking about? If these were pieces of Muhammad's finger or Jesus' finger, this place would be overrun. But in fact, here it was in a room dedicated for other stuff, which tells you something about the nature of Buddhism in India, which is irrelevant. But to actually see this, which had been dug up in a place where we had been, actually come face to face to pieces of this individual was quite moving and actually hard to process at the moment. So to finish, let me tell you about some practicalities. Many of you, most of you in fact, have traveled in India. I want to just tell you a little bit about, if you think of going, which I hope you do, a few sort of recommendations. Don't overplan it. We arrived in Kolkata, I had a place to stay, a flight to Varanasi, and after that, it's probably worthwhile just figuring it out as you go. You can do it. When you arrive, you can get a SIM card for your mobile phone, and that'll allow you to figure stuff out as you go, because coverage is quite extensive. You can, in the big cities like Varanasi and Kolkata, you can use these apps. In other places, even pretty far away, you can use these to find your way around. And this is a very helpful thing to have on your phone. But you'll still need a good guidebook like the one which is over there. We weren't going really rough, somewhat rough, but not really rough. So we were paying around US equivalent of $20 to $30 a night because we wanted air conditioning. We could have stayed a lot cheaper if we had gone without. Food, one of the best cuisines in the world, of course, as you know. I wanted to travel by train because of comfort and because I was worried about tummy trouble, which actually never happened. But in a train, of course, you've got more access to dealing with that. Never was an issue for us on this trip. People were very helpful, as people are here too. People who come from overseas, people there were very helpful for us as long as we found people who spoke English. Last thing I want to mention to you is that you don't need to carry a lot of cash. There are ATMs all over the place in the smallest places. But remember to alert your bank that you're traveling overseas. One of our first days in Kolkata, Ricardo went to get some money out of an ATM machine, and it canceled his card. And I got really worried because I had a card. We didn't have very much money. His card is now trash. What does he do? He immediately goes and buys the most expensive yogurt in the world, about $7 yogurt. So $7 of yogurt here. We have almost not enough money to get out of town. We've got one card now. So he calms me down. And here's what he says. It's not playing. Sorry. There is actually a tape of him.
Everything is going to be okay, and I can assure you. Okay, please take this conversation.
Please take this conversation. So he's calming me down that everything's going to be okay. So I really enjoyed sharing this trip with you. Thank you very much for coming tonight. A little over time, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
How did you manage with so little money? How did it work out?
My ATM card was fine all the way through.
Oh.
So in almost every place we went except Shrivasti, there were ATM machines. And in Nepal, in Lumbini, it was much of the time we were there, they were closed, but we were able to get enough Nepal rupees to get by. So it was fine.
Yeah, my daughter got married in India, and 7 of us went over there, and every single one of us got sick. How did you do it?
Just luck, I guess, because I've been there before 3 or 4 times for work and didn't have as much luck those times. So I don't know. I was really paranoid about this. And the first few places we stayed, I was just eating dal. Because I thought, it's hot, I'm not going to get any problems here. Ricardo was going at it, going at it. But sooner, as the time went by, I really sort of relaxed and never had a problem. So
Drinking the water?
no, but we always bought bottled water.
Any mosquitoes experiencing permits?
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did, yes. But as I said, whatever larvae were injected into us were taken care of by this rock society. Please.
The coffee shop is very since workers cooperative.
Yes.
Did you talk with them, like how many workers they have, how long have they been there, and how they come up with this idea?
I didn't. It is famous for that. It's a cooperative. It goes way back to colonial times. So I'm guessing at least 100 years old. Yeah, there are a couple other stories that I could tell you at some time, but I didn't get into any discussion of their governance. As I said, though, it's sort of famous for mediocre coffee. Please.
In world history, there are these major epochs of time, and you've got the golden age in the Bible of civilization, and that corresponds to Socrates, the age of truth. Then the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. We're at the tail end of the Iron Age, which is the least pure of them. So they have all the wars and everything like that. But in the Golden Age, they flew around in Vermont aircraft. I mean, sometimes you can ask somebody, I ask people, because I got involved in this exposure program in New York, in Hawaii. I'd ask people at various times, "Did you ever see a UFO?" And they'd say, "No, I never saw a UFO." Well, everybody, if they have eyes to see, and they've gone out in a dark night, and you look at the stars with the red lights, the blue lights, the white lights, and the green lights, they're not stars. And then you see them go one way, and go another. We have a lot of UFOs flying around us.
Let me tell you about one thing I learned recently about the age that he lived in. This book was talking about it being the axial age, the age he lived in. And it was an age, as I said, he was contemporaneous with Confucius and Socrates. And these were people who were saying, they were changing things from the past. Their predecessors had been talking about worship and devotion and gods, and that's the way you advanced as a human being. Those three, including the Buddha, really talked about put in the hard work yourself. So he was that age, which could be called other things. His book I was reading called it the axial age for some reason. He was of a time where this idea that we can figure it out, we must figure it out ourselves. It's the only way. That was one of the characteristics, the zeitgeist of that time.
Mark, it's clearly, seeing your photos, it's a country that doesn't seem to work very well, at least in terms of trash and maintaining buildings and getting your assigned seat on your train and all that. Why, other than the obvious, why do you think that is? Perhaps to a degree in India that is greater than anywhere else. Is the society trying to deal with that? Are they trying to get more organized and cleaner and all that?
So our town planner is asking why India doesn't run very well. And I would, in some ways, you're right. I would try to refute it a little bit. India Rails is by far the largest rail system in the world and runs pretty well. It is a country of 1.2 billion people, which manages its elections at least as well as we do. Due respect to this town, but in this country we've got a ways to go in that sense. I'm very impressed with how India has evolved just in the time that I've gone there since early 2000s. But to take your question a little more seriously, it's a deeply diverse place with many hundreds of languages, deep ethnic differences, a religious tradition which is I can't really speak of, but is profound, but is also very rigid in the way it sets up the society with the caste system. It's a very complicated place, and the fact that it works as well as it does, I think, is pretty amazing, actually, and is getting better and better. And it's the biggest democracy in the world, and that part seems to work fairly well. So, one slide I didn't show you about hygiene. It showed Gandhi and the 5 recommendations he had back in his day, and they were all about hygiene. And so I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges they've got, and I can't say why has that not been dealt with. It's a very poor. A lot of the country is still very poor. It doesn't cost that much to deal with that problem, so I can't really answer the question. If I were Prime Minister, I would want to put a lot of emphasis on hygiene. Other questions? Please.
If you could show again the slide that shows, it looks like a branching of a tree and it has the 8, I guess, probably the crux of Buddhism. I just wanted to read it. It's probably about the 3rd slide you showed.
So it wasn't this thing here?
No, it listed 8 things I will not
Oh,
Me-
yeah.
I just wanted to see that again, just because I'm interested.
Was it
It
the
was
four-
very early on, and
The Four Noble
Said, I
Truths?
observe.
yeah, I think it mentioned it was 8 things. It's early on. I don't want it to be difficult and distracting from other things.
Wasn't that one?
It was
It's like a
sign.
stone
It was a
monument.
sign.
Ah, yeah. I got it. Okay, that was in Lumpini. That
I just
is,
wanted to read it more thoroughly.
yep.
Yeah, thank you.
So these are called precepts. These are 5 precepts. They're related to the 8 the Eightfold Noble Path. These are things that Buddhists are supposed to abide by. You could compare these. I think are quite comparable to some of the 10 Commandments of Christianity. Sila means morality. And so, without getting into too much detail, the Eightfold Noble Path has 3 sections. There's morality, live a moral life, and these are the instructions. There's samadhi, which is concentration of the mind, which is about meditation. And then there's panya, which is self-knowledge. So his teachings were mainly in those 3 areas. And this is about an ethical or moral life.
What are the other 3? You said right, there's only 5.
That's right. This is not exactly there are 3 that are in here. It's a complicated religious tradition. Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. So this is Sila, and there are 3 actual what I call noble paths. There are 3 steps of the noble path here that are broken out in these 5 ways. Sorry, too complicated.
We're going to have to wrap up. Maybe we have time for one more question.
All right, I'll ask, since we have one more question. You've addressed this a lot, but we haven't been to India, and friends of ours have told us, and I would love to go, but they say it's very difficult, and it's not for amateurs, and you got to really plan a lot, and maybe you need to have an Indian guide you the whole way. How much for people like us, middle-aged people, travel a fair amount, smart people? How hard is it to go to India? Or do you have to really have a lot of guidance and go on a tour or something?
It's not hard. The hard thing is time. If you have a lot of time, we had a month, and you don't want to tie yourself down to seeing the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort and specific things in a specific time, if you can free yourself. It's hard for our town planner to free himself from planning. Free yourself from planning. So what I would say...
Life is suffering.
So if you could take a month and just say, I'm going to go to Kolkata, I'm going to Delhi, and I'm going to do as much as I can do, and I don't have a real sort of list of things I have to do, it's easy. Super easy to do it. You would have no problem. If you try to figure it out, it's going to be costly, it's going to be difficult to do, and really if you sort of, it's not a Buddhist country, but take a Buddhist attitude to it. Don't be attached to your program. Go with it and say, here's the places we want to get to. You've got to get back to Delhi, you've got to get back to Kolkata by now, by this date, for my flight. Give yourself 2 days slack at the end of that. Just go for it. And you saw the kinds of trains that we were in. It's not uncomfortable. So I guess you've got 2 choices. You could take a sort of a Western package tour type of approach. It's going to be challenging and expensive, and you'll do it. You could see the highlights. Or just, if you've got the time, just throw yourself into it and relax and say, okay, Naomi and I want to go to Varanasi now. Start asking. And you'll get there. Somebody will say, well, go over there. There's a train there. Here's the table that's falling over. You can buy a ticket there. You'll figure it out, and you'll go. So I guess my answer would be, it's not hard to do at all. We had no problems on this trip. But part of it was that we had no agenda, other than we'd like to get to these places. Frankly, there was one place, a minor place in the life of that guy, that we didn't get to, because we just didn't want to rush. So if you can take that luxury and not be planning it hard for you, for our planner, you'd love it. So thank you all very much for coming.
Just do.